Okay, so I just wanted to continue with the detailing tools in Revit and just continue to give you more of an overview of the things on the Annotate tab, which again are mostly associated with detailing, but notice you've also got text and dimensions there because those are controlled in the same way as things like detail lines. So that means they're view specific and they're 2D. So if you create text, and let's just say this is a room label, so it's, I don't know, sitting area or something. Oops. And then you can have all of the labels done that way. If I duplicate this view without choosing duplicate as detailing, if I just choose duplicate, oops, I'll just do that again. There we are. So it's copied it without the text to show you that text is just like a 2D overlay. The other option, if I choose duplicate with detailing, it will copy it with the text, but again the text is still unique to each view. So if I delete it from the copy, it's not deleted from the original. And so it's the same with all of these things on the Annotate tab. Dimensions are the same, and then detail lines are the same as well. So all those things we were looking at with detail lines last week are unique to each view, and then just remember you've got the line styles which you can manage using the line styles option on the Manage tab, and then remember you've got line weights, which is important even if you don't need to adjust these, just so you've got a good understanding of the way line weights change depending on your scale, which is an important basic principle of technical drawing. And then moving on from there, you have these Revit-specific tools like the insulation tool, which I'll just look at quickly. The insulation tool is a brilliant little thing in Revit, which lets you draw insulation. And it's basically like a repeating detail, which I'll show you in a minute. And you can set the width and other properties there, like the bulge there, which changes the appearance of that insulation symbol. So you can adjust those things, and all of that just comes up either in properties or even on the options bar there. But then one little tip, I can just remind you and remind myself that to change the colour, at the moment that's grey, to change the colour you go back to line styles and you can adjust the insulation batting lines line style. I don't know why you would ever change the line pattern. You always leave that solid, I think, but then you can definitely change the colour there, so I'll just make that black. And of course you can change the line weight if you want to, but again, normally leave that properly on 1. So then I've got black insulation, which actually is probably a bit too heavy, so I'll go back and change that back to grey. That's a bit too light, but actually I don't mind that. Okay, so actually I can't send that to back because they're 3D things. But then just maybe to finish off with those basic things you have on the Annotate tab. I don't know if we got very far with regions, but I'll just quickly show you filled regions are like your hatches in AutoCAD. So they're great for things like interior elevations because often you can use those to do things like tiles where you don't want to go all the way to use the paint tool to paint a surface of a bathroom just to give you the tile pattern for one interior elevation. It's much easier just to draw a filled region and you get more control. So the paint tool works. You could use split face to divide up a wall surface and then the paint tool to assign a tile material, and that would definitely work. But I think if it's only for one elevation, it's much easier to just do it the old AutoCAD way, which is to essentially draw a hatch for that tile material. And that's what I've done here with a filled region. I've drawn a rectangle, and then I'll go to Edit Type, Duplicate, and I'll give it the name of my tile pattern, Tile 150 by 150. And then simply change the foreground fill pattern there, making sure it's on Model, and then I'll make a new pattern just to show you how easy that is. New pattern, and we'll call it 150 by 150. and make it a crosshatch. Set the line angle to 0, so it's just like AutoCAD, and then set the line spacing to 150 in each direction. And there we are. So how easy is that? And drawing each line, yeah, that takes a while. Yeah. So that works, but this is a bit faster. Yeah. So, and then if you want to change, in AutoCAD, I'm sure you all know that you can set the origin of a hatch pattern as well to make it start from a certain point. In Revit, you just need to use the Align tool, and you can pick any edge there and easily line that up with whatever you want. So you can see there we've got a tile starting on the bottom. And so that's a nice approach. And then again, because it's done with a manual hatch pattern, if you want to do whole tiles, you can line this up exactly with your tiles, which is nice as well. So again, it's still using the AutoCAD approach though, which is all I want to get across to you with this detailing in Revit. And then make it clear, why AutoCAD is still such a great thing to know. So then you've got masking regions as well, just to make sure you know about those. They're just for covering things up. And that can help you a lot when you've got a lot of 3D detail, especially, that you don't want to see in your sections or your plans. You can use masking regions to cover that up, and that's a nice thing, and often for detailing that's really useful. So here you can see I've got a join between my floors, which is coming up because of the way this has been modelled. I don't want to see that. I know I can fix it by changing the materials, but I just want to quickly get rid of that. So one option would be to put a masking region over that. That's what a lot of people end up doing because they don't know the other way, which I'm going to show you in a minute. So that works. And just remember, with regions in Revit as opposed to hatches in AutoCAD, the boundaries have a style. In other words, these lines have a line style. At the moment, they're set to thin lines. But if you don't want to see them, you just set them to invisible lines.
And does the mask include the line?
Hey? No. The line is part of the mask. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So you can see there I've got an invisible thing which I can just adjust to try and hide that little bit of the line that I don't want.
That's tricky when the line is fatter than that.
That's right. Yeah, it's a bit fiddly, but yeah. So it's my least preferred option, but it works if you need to do it. And when you zoom out, no one will know that it's not perfect. So that does the job. But I'll show you another little good workaround. On the Modify tab, it's not on Annotate. But on the Modify tab, you've got this line work option. And you can use that to override any line style in Revit. So with that, I can choose invisible lines. And then just make that line invisible.
That's tricky. That's clever.
So, there's another one underneath it, so I'll just make that invisible too. Yeah, it's great. So I often end up with lots of extra lines between different things. Oh, this is an analytical floor, that won't hide.
So editing something without actually really editing.
It is, absolutely. Yeah.
It's line work.
So don't worry about that grey thing. That's because this is an analytical floor, and I never use those, but someone has, and that's why it's coming. But don't worry about that. We'll look at those analytical things later. But that grey doesn't. That's different. So maybe here's some better examples where I've got some extra lines that I don't want to see. So again, invisible lines, and there we go. Make that one go away, and this one too. That's a bit neater. So yeah, it's a great thing just for cleaning up. And also can be used, instead of making them invisible, you can make it change the line weight to something else. So if I go for the 0.1 pen, I can make these lines all light. Oh, and there we go. I've got this issue. Someone's gone and changed it probably was me, my line style.
That could create problems though when you go to a different view, couldn't it?
Oh, it's only in that view.
It's only in that
Yeah,
view.
yeah.
Oh, well, that's much better.
Yeah, it is a good system. So it's unique to each view. And
Oh, that's very useful.
yeah, it is, yeah. So you can use that to clean things up, but it's still using the detailing approach. So again, we've got detail lines, line style overrides, and filled regions. And that's probably what you use for the majority of your detailing. But then you can take that a lot further, building up collections of detail lines in these things called detail components. So you see the big firms that use Revit for all their detailing have huge libraries of details they've built up and made into detail components, and a lot of that comes from AutoCAD. So they want to reuse all these, big libraries of details that they've built up over decades in AutoCAD, and they bring those into detail components in Revit, and it gives you a great library of details that you can then use in all your Revit projects. So you'll see as well they've got a lot if you go into load family, and then detail items, and then let's go to carpentry, and you've got all these things that have been made natively in Revit as well, like cornices. Because I often find cornices, especially for things like, say, bathrooms, where you're not really going to show a 3D perspective of those all the time. If you don't need to see it in perspective, why go to the trouble of modelling cornices all around the different corners of your bathrooms when you're only going to see them in one or two elevations? So why not do it in the 2D way, the way AutoCAD has for decades, using detail tools. So you've got this 2D cornice, which is a detail item in Revit, and then you could put one on the other side, and then simply draw a detail line using your thinnest pen to continue that bottom edge across to complete your elevation. So that's a pretty typical approach for a lot of the detail type drawings that you get from Revit, basically using the AutoCAD approach, and detail components build on that. But the advantage is, because it's controlled in Revit, if you decide that the cornice needs to change, you can easily edit that family, and it's going to update all those detail components. And later you'll see you can tie it in with your scheduling and do lots of powerful sort of bin things with these detail components as well. But again, still building on AutoCAD. And so then you have, so detail components is a huge thing. I'll just quickly show you again where the library is. You might see there's a shortcut on the left, sometimes called Metric Detail Library, which will take you straight to it. But if you're in the metric library, you can easily just go to detail items, and that's the same folder. And they do give you a pretty good selection of these families that you can use straight up. So there's a brick that you can just load in. It's got all sorts of door and window components and lots of things. This isn't even the full library. I'll show you if we go to the Revit library on the P drive, and there is another, there's a detail components folder there, which I've got a lot more added to. And so if we have a look at, say, oh no, don't go there. There's one that's got some big things. Annotations has got a few things. Here we go. Wheelchair, mechanical should have a bit more in it. There we go. So there you've got some drains, and all those things take time to draw. So if you need to do a bathroom sections for your floor waste, you've got the drain, because who wants to model floor waste in 3D just for one section, right? But again, you don't have to. Just load it in the 2D way, and it's a very simple thing. So make sure you know about that. Later, when you need to do more detailing, that'll make your life a lot easier if you're going to choose to do it in Revit. And then the final thing that I want to make sure you just at least know about is, before we go into legends, that will be the last thing, but this next thing, repeating details. It's one of the coolest things in Revit, but so many people don't know about it, and that's why they don't use it, but I think it's one of the best things. So say if you need to do a brick wall. So let's pretend this wall here is brick. At the moment it looks very thick. It's casework. I'll just put in a wall. So I'm going to go back and just add a wall to my plan. So I'm going to put a brick wall just behind this one. Yeah. There we are. And that might not be something you actually need for fire rating or something. So, okay, so let's go back to the section. And now, there my brick wall's there, but it's not high enough. I'll just bring that up. Okay, so I've got this brick wall, which comes up in section with the standard brick hatch. If I go to a better scale, maybe 1 to 20, it changes. Well, it seems like the scale of the hatch pattern is changing, but of course it's not, because it would print out the same size as it did on the 1 to 100. It's the view that's changing size. But if you're at 1 to 20, you probably wouldn't want to see that hatch pattern. You'd want to see the bricks. You'd want to see each brick in section. And again, who wants to model every brick in a brick wall just to get them to come up in section? I've seen some people think that way. They think, I've got to model every nut, bolt and screw and every brick and every piece of timber framing in my model to get a perfect section or other things, quantities and things like that. But it's actually the wrong approach. So it's better to keep it like this as a simple box shape on the outside in 3D, and then to get that interior detail, again on the Annotate tab, we've got repeating details. The one that's loaded, you can see, is called Repeating Detail Brick. So I'm just going to draw from the bottom here and go up, and what do you know? We get repeating details of a brick. And notice how it even lines the hatch pattern up. Yeah, so it's just a 2D overlay on top of this wall. And it is the perfect size of a brick, an Australian standard brick. So if we select that, you'll see it's got settings for the spacing. And, oops, sorry, that's not the detail. I've just got to get the detail. There we go, that's my detail. And if you look at that, you'll see it's set to 86 mil. So you can do your flashing and everything else off that repeating detail. Yeah, I know. Well, yeah, it's one of those things once you know about it. And then, so if you ever need to do roof tiling, they've got a detail for that. But to get things like repeating details loaded into your projects, you need to have probably a deeper understanding of Revit than you might if you're just used to loading regular families. But I'm sure you mostly will remember this. Do you remember how to load things like stairs and railings? Yeah. You don't load them with load families. Right? They're not loadable families. Okay, so what that means is that when you look at them in properties, in type properties, they come up as a system family. So that's where I've gone through this before, but it takes a while for it to sink in, because it's only when you start to use it, it'll make more sense. So a system family, it's a type of family that you can't change, essentially. That's why it doesn't give you the load option there. It's not loadable, it's not customisable. It doesn't mean you can't do things with it, it's just that you do things with the types. So at the moment I've only got the brick type loaded. So to get other types, you can use, there is a way of using loaders group. You can also use transfer project standards. There are a few different methods, but the simplest and easiest to understand way is to open. And again, I've shown you this before, but it takes a while for it to make a lot of sense. You've got to do it a few times. So on the File menu, click where it says Open. Where people have trouble here is they think too much, and they choose an option from the menu here, and that makes it harder. Don't even choose this sample files folder option, even though that's where I'm going to show you to go. It just doesn't work as well. So it's better just to click where it says Open, and that will open all supported Revit files. That's what we're trying to do here. So then, do you remember how to get to sample files? Go to the metric library folder, and then you'll see sample files. It comes with Revit. When you install it, you'll always get that sample files folder. And notice how you have railings, that I've shown you before, stairs, shown you before, fences are just a type of railing, and then you've even got roofs, and then what do you know? You've got repeating details. So if you open that up, you'll see they do give you a pretty good selection of pre-made repeating details that you can use in your own projects. And you can modify these. They're just a collection of detail components that are built up in a repeating pattern. So again, if you ever need to do a roof showing the tiles in section, this is how you do it. So if I want that into my other project, it probably wouldn't make sense there, but I'll just show you. To bring it across, this is a project file. So I'm going to select it using copy to clipboard, go back to my other view in the project, and then under modify, choose paste. Click to place it anywhere, doesn't matter where it goes, because we can now place it with the repeating detail option. And from the list there, you can see now I've got the double pan tile is the new one, and I can draw any length I want. It is, yeah, really good system. And there are lots of things that make sense as repeating details, if you think about it. That's right, sample files is the key. Yeah. And so, yeah, so maybe I'll just quickly show you the others if you've forgotten about them. So the railings. So stairs as well. You've got those basic stair types. Yep. So that's it. I mean, they're a system family, but technically what we're doing is copying types across. You do things at the type level when you're dealing with system families, basically. So that's the key to it. When you go to edit type, you're not changing the family, you're changing the type.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
So it's more like a wall.
It is. It's just like a wall. That's spot on. Yeah, walls are another system family. Yeah, that's it. It's just those little technical things in Revit. At first, when we explain it, it won't mean a lot, but the more you use it, then the easier it should be. That's it, exactly, yeah. And there is a perfectly good reason for it. It's a pretty technical thing, but there is a good reason for it. But I won't go into that. So, yeah, so here, repeating details are a brilliant thing. And for interiors, you do use them all the time, even though you might not, use the roof one too much, even though sometimes you will need to show roofs, but other repeating details you use all the time in interiors. And so then the final thing is legends to finish off on detailing. And if you want to use those, you might have seen already in the project browser, it does have a legends category. So how do you make a legend? On the View tab, you can go to Legends, and then you've got two types. Keynote Legends are actually brilliant. When you've got large projects and you're going to use Keynotes, Keynotes are fantastic. But if you haven't done any Keynote specifications yet, I wouldn't worry about those. So the other one is just a general legend. So with a legend, you need to set a scale. So, and you'll see why in a minute. A lot of other programs, this wouldn't be necessary, but in Revit, you'll see there's a good reason they want you to set a scale. So I'll just click OK. So then, to place things on my legend, we go back to the Annotate tab. Under Component, then you can see Legend Component comes up now. And then you'll see it gives you this pretty good list with all of the families you've loaded already. They have their own legend version. Yeah, it is. It's a brilliant. They've made so many clever decisions when they were doing things in the background with Revit, and but it takes a while to get to it. So, so things like the toilets. So they're plumbing fixtures. We've got these WCs, which you'll see here. I've forgotten what they're called, but that should be one. Oh, that's a basin. Well, it's still a basin. Oh, that's a component of a basin, so I don't care about that. Let's get a full basin. Here, this will do. That's got the vanity, we don't need that. We just want the... Yeah, there we go, there's a basin. And, okay, so then you need to know the names of the families you've already used, but you will because you're the ones... no, only for this project, yeah. So here's a cistern, which we don't care about, so I'll find another one. Again, it helps if you know the names, I don't. So I'm just going to choose them at random. Maybe I'll get a lighting fixture. So that one's just a fluoro, so that is fine if it's a rectangle. And then maybe that one hasn't been set up very well. But let's get BuzzFeed. What? Oh no, BuzzHub. Okay. All right. So so maybe this one. That'll do. Okay. So I've got these legend components, and you might think that the labelling would be done for you automatically, but that's one thing you have to do yourself. So you just use text, and you can say, it's a Chroma, whatever model. and label them like that. So that can then go onto your sheets. And unlike other view types in Revit, right, you can place multiple copies onto different views. So does that make sense? So I'm sure you all know that if you try and put the same view onto different sheets, it'll give you an error. But legends can go onto different sheets, which makes sense because you often want the same legend on different pages. So that's it. I'm just going to point out the other tools. I haven't got time to show them all to you, but you've also got revision clouds. So I know you've been doing revision clouds in AutoCAD, and the revision cloud tool in AutoCAD is pretty good. But you can also do revision clouds in Revit, and it's a bit more automated. And so you can even make those tie into your title block and have your amendments list or schedule come up automatically and be connected to these revision clouds. The other thing that I won't go through properly, I'll just point out to you, is you have detailed groups. And that can be a really powerful thing when you have lots of different identical details or similar parts of details that you can then have repeated across different detail views. That idea of detailed groups is really powerful, actually. You can do lots with it. And very similar, though, to regular groups. And so just a couple of other quick things I can point out there. Keynotes, I mentioned to you briefly. You have Keynote Legends, and then you can use Keynote Referencing. And for larger projects, that's normally a very common way of referencing your construction. So have any of you had a look at Keynotes? So essentially you get a number or some sort of key system of referencing that you can then tie into a specification. So here you can see these numbers, and it's tied in with there are standard key values that you can get from organisations like NatSpec and Cordell's and people, but NatSpec do a really good one. And so that way you can have the standard key values instead of having individual notes everywhere. You can just use these keynotes, and then that ties directly into your specification. So that's a brilliant system. So you've pretty much got to buy a one of those professional products like the NatSpec general specification. Yeah. So you've got that, and then, but otherwise, tagging is probably better. If you're not going to go all the way to do keynotes, you can just use tags. So if you go tag by category is fine. You can pick any element, and you can have an inbuilt tag to that. So here we can have, say, a wall tag, and I can put in, say, this is CV1 or something, if it's covered in brick wall. And so now all of those walls that are of the same type automatically come up as CV1. And then you can have a legend that lists what that wall type is. So that's a really good approach. And you can also put the wall in your legend as well. It will come up as a legend component. And tagging's brilliant. So you can tag anything. I can tag these WCs. And I need to load a tag family for them. So plumbing might be here, maybe not. I'm going to go to mechanical maybe. Yeah, plumbing fixture tag, there we are. So now I can tag my WC. In fact, I don't need the leader there, so I'd probably tag it without that. And then again, you just come up with a system of referencing. So in your legend, you would say WC1 is Coroma whatever, or Cola whatever. So you don't have to put all the notes onto your drawing. You have that in your legend. You can see how much quicker it is then to do your annotation. And this is why Revit is becoming a fairly standard tool for documentation once you get to this level of management. takes a bit longer to set up, but once you've got it set up, managing all of the changes is much more systematic, and for large projects it's really helpful. So again, you've got all those tagging options, and then we'll maybe just touch on the others later, but stair paths, symbols, they're really useful as well. So it's just good to have a look at all the things on that Annotate tab and make sure you've got an idea about them. And so maybe we'll finish up with symbols, because symbols are one that you will be using. I'm sure you've used them already if you've ever needed to place a north point. So, oh yeah, it depends how they've been made, yeah. So, so with symbol, you can place things like north points, and then one that's really important for most of you is graphical scales. So I've made a fair few that you can use, but you might be able to do something better if you start with these. So I've made, here you go, one for 1 to 50, another one 1 to 100, 1 to 200, and so on, a few different variations on those. So they go on your sheet level. It's like you're drawing your paper space in AutoCAD. Okay, so it doesn't pick up the scale. You need to know what that is. Right, but if you need to do graphical scales, that's a really good option. I guess that should be enough on annotation in Revit, but just want to give you an idea about that so that you can look at those options, and then again later when you're doing your major project, think about the process and whether you need to model everything in 3D, because that's where we have a lot of problems with these huge spaces and projects that you work on. When people model everything in 3D, especially things like bathrooms, if you've got a 50-storey building, or some people have had buildings nearly that big, at least 10, 20 stories, like the silos will be, if you've got bathrooms fitted out with all these detailed 3D bathroom fittings, and I've seen people with, I'm not joking, 500, 600 taps that are never seen. They've never done a 3D view of the bathroom ever in those final presentations, because the living spaces and the public spaces are much more important. So who wants to see a tiny little, especially if it's just a bathroom for a WC, but then they put all the 3D detail for every single part of the toilet and the taps and the fittings, like I said, and then they wonder why the file's 500 meg when it could easily be 20 or 30. Yeah, that's right. Yep. And so these are a classic example. These toilets, let's see what they are. They look 3D to me. Yeah, that's a 3D toilet. Who is ever going to see that inside that cubicle? Even if you were to do a perspective of the bathroom, which I know you have, you're not going to see inside the cubicles. Yeah, but you'll see the cubicles, but you won't see what's inside them. So they could easily be 2D. Toilets don't look very nice in perspective. So why show them? Even if you're going to, bathroom can be a nice thing, but you normally hide the toilets and try and show other bits, the nice parts, like the vanities and things where you can do all the nice, finishing and everything. So I very rarely put 3D toilets in. I only put 3D toilets in if I want to get sections, and even then there are 2D sections you can build into your families as well. But otherwise that should do it on detailing in Revit. As long as you've got a bit of an idea, you can build on that and hopefully extend it to some other things.